We bring you to the darker side of investigations. This is the Investigation Guru podcast with Sean and Dana.
Hello and welcome to the Investigation Guru podcast. This is the official podcast for Red Door Investigations. My name is Sean, and I'd like to thank everyone for taking a little bit of time out of their day and hanging out with us. Today we're going to be talking about the Vanessa Guillén case. Now, if you haven't heard about Vanessa Guillén, she has gotten a lot of media attention lately. A lot of people on YouTube, a lot of podcasters are really talking about her case. She was murdered earlier this year in a very heinous and brutal way. But there are quite a bit of people who are really interested in the outcome of this case and wanting to get justice for Vanessa, and a lot of things are really happening on social media, and she's really gotten quite a bit of attention. A lot of support for her family, which is outstanding, and there are even some celebrities that have kind of jumped on the bandwagon and have started bringing a lot of attention to this case. So this is a really good thing. We're going to kind of talk about here in a minute how the Army and a lot of other people are probably covering up exactly what happened. So again, the more light and the more attention that we can bring to this case, the better. All right, so Vanessa's early life. Vanessa was born on September 30th, 1999 in Houston, Texas. This would make her about 20 years old at the time of her passing. Her parents were Rogelio and Gloria Guillén, and she had 5 siblings. She graduated in the top 15% of her class from Cesar E. Chavez High School in Houston in 2018. She played soccer, she loved to jog, and she was avid about sports and learning. She was a very happy and very active girl. After graduation from high school, she joined the Army in June of 2018 and was assigned to Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas. A year or so into her service, Vanessa started to experience what she called sexual harassment at her work. Now, the exact nature of what she experienced isn't really known because Vanessa chose not to disclose what was happening to her or who was harassing her. She did actually report to her family that she was being sexually harassed at work, but never identified who it was or who was harassing her, and she never reported it to her superiors. So it remained kind of a mystery, and even now, we have no idea who it was that was harassing her. But we know that for all intents and purposes, there was probably someone on base that was actually harassing her sexually, and her family became quite worried about her and were worried about her physical safety on the base. Military installations, they tend to have kind of notorious reputations for how they treat their women. And a lot of times this kind of sexual harassment and this culture of sexual domination and how women are kind of viewed as objects and maybe less than their male counterparts, this has really become a very pervasive thing in the military. This is by no means an isolated incident. There were many people who suspected that a man who was in charge of an armory room nearby where Vanessa worked, Specialist Aaron David Robinson, was actually the one who was harassing her. But again, this was never proven because Vanessa never reported it to her superiors. So this is really just kind of speculation. And we'll go into how this might have been even possible motive for her murder. We think that there's a great deal of evidence that points to Specialist Robinson as being the person who actually killed her. Vanessa went missing on April 22nd, 2020. She was actually called into work that day, which was actually her day off. So she was at home kind of kicking back and relaxing, and she was actually called into work. Specialist Robinson, who was in charge of another armory nearby where Vanessa worked, was actually the one who called her in that day. Vanessa also worked in the base armory, but she was posted in a different building than the one that Robinson had led. So there were actually 2 armory buildings. Specialist Robinson led one of them, and Vanessa worked in the other one. So, being called in that day, Vanessa reported to the arms room where she was posted, and then headed over to Robinson's armory. So she reported to her regular assignment, kind of dropped off her keys and her bag and her coat and everything, and then she walked across the little area there and reported over to Specialist Robinson's armory. She then left the arms room where she normally worked, her normal post, and she went to go to a second armory room. Now, this armory room was headed by Specialist Robinson, and she was sent there to confirm some serial numbers for some weapons and equipment. And once she was in that second room with Specialist Robinson, she never returned to a regular post, leaving her belongings in the original arms room where she was originally posted. So all of her belongings stayed in the first post where she went, and when she went over to meet with Specialist Robinson to get those serial numbers, she never returned to the original post where she was. While she was there in the second arms room with Specialist Robinson, it is thought that she was murdered. And there is some evidence, or some speculation, I guess I should say, that Specialist Robinson is the one who was sexually harassing her. Sexual harassment in the military is a very, very toxic, very, very pervasive phenomenon. And, people who think that, the price of admission for women to be in the military is to have to put up with this crap, that is not accurate. That is not true, and that is not helpful, and it is not good to send that message out that women, if they want to hang with the boys, then that's just something they're going to have to put up with. That's not how it's supposed to be. That's not how it is. Another possible motive is that Robinson was actually secretly having an affair with a woman named Cecily Ann Aguilar, who was 22 years old, still actually is 22 years old, who is the estranged wife of former U.S. soldier Keon Devontae Aguilar. Vanessa may have threatened to actually report Robinson for the affair, which could have, of course, gotten him in quite a bit of trouble with his superiors. I think that would fall under the line of something in the neighborhood of conduct unbecoming or whatever. Robinson claimed that the reason that Vanessa was at work at his post that day was so that he could give her paperwork and a serial number for a .50 caliber machine gun that needed to be serviced. So he, in order to have her come in and kind of process that paperwork for this .50 caliber machine gun that needed to be worked on, he called her in to the base on her day off. Robinson reported that Vanessa, when she had gotten that paperwork to get the .50 caliber machine gun serviced, she left his arms room, the room that he was in charge of, and he thought that the next destination she would head to would be the base motor pool, which is where they service all the vehicles and where all the vehicles get logged in and tagged and maintained and that sort of thing. Workers at the motor pool who were actually prepared to receive the paperwork from Vanessa claimed that she never showed up. So somewhere between arriving in Specialist Robinson's armory room and the time that she was supposed to have been reporting to the motor pool, she was killed. Her car keys, her barracks room key, her identification card, and her wallet were later found in the armory room where she was working earlier that day. So not Specialist Robinson's armory room, but the armory room that she actually reported on every normal day that she reported to the base. A search of Vanessa's phone records showed that Robinson was actually the last person that she texted and was one of the last persons to see her alive. Because he was the last person to see her alive, Aaron Robinson is the main suspect in Vanessa's murder. So we know that she actually reported to her main armory post, and we know that she left all her keys and all her belongings, her purse and everything, in that room where she normally worked, and then she reported over to Specialist Robinson's armory room, but she never made it to her next destination. So logically, this would say that unless she disappeared and was abducted somewhere in between, the walk from Specialist Robinson's armory room to the motor pool, then Specialist Robinson was the last person to see her alive. Because he was the last person to see her alive, Aaron Robinson is the main suspect in her murder. Vanessa was later found burned, dismembered, and buried in 3 shallow graves about 30 miles from Fort Hood. Her death resulted from being bludgeoned multiple times in the head with a hammer. Damn. Bludgeoned multiple times in the head with a hammer. I can't imagine the amount of cruelty and brutality that it would take to kill someone by bludgeoning them in the head with a hammer. That is just unconscionable. That is borderline psychopathic. The ability to really traumatize somebody's body in that way. I can't really wrap my head. I can't fathom what it would take for someone to be able to do that. Just the again, the cruelty and the brutality of what happened to Vanessa is very, very shocking. Vanessa was a very small girl, basically. She was very, very young. And to be able to do that to someone is, I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Anyway, after allegedly, quote unquote, killing her, it's thought that, Aaron Robinson was the one who did that, since he was the last person to see her alive, and she was apparently killed in his armory room. He was the only one on duty that day. So we're going to kind of just assume that it was him who killed her. And we're going to kind of talk about what happened and how he was captured and things like that here in just a minute. So all signs are really pointing towards Aaron Robinson being the person who bludgeoned her with a hammer on a military base and disposed of her body. But again, that's it. He never went to trial for it. He was never proven guilty in a court of law, et cetera, yada, 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 whatever. Let's just assume that Specialist Robinson is the one who did it. Anyway, after killing her, Robinson stuffed her corpse, her dead body, into something called a tough box. Now, if you don't know what a tough box is, it's kind of one of those big toolbox things that it kind of looks like an ice chest, those big ice chests with the hinged lids that have wheels and kind of a handle. He stuffed her body inside one of those tough boxes, and then grabbed the handle of the tough box and wheeled it outside and loaded it onto the bed of his truck, and then he drove off the base. When he was later interviewed by CID agents, CID is the Criminal Investigation Division for the Army, Robinson claimed that he went home after work the day of Vanessa's abduction and disappearance, and he has no idea what possibly happened to her. When last time he saw her, she was walking out the door headed towards the armory. But again, remember that she never made it to the armory. So between the time that she arrived at Specialist Robinson's armory post and the time that she was supposed to report to the motor pool to have that, I guess that's one of the places where she was supposed to go to next to have, get some more serial numbers or whatever, to have those weapons serviced. Between those two times, that is when she was murdered. Robinson claimed that he remained home where he lived with Aguilar for the rest of the evening, except for a brief trip he made to the base to use a computer to sign up for some training. His appearance on base was later confirmed by two witnesses who saw him come onto base and go into the computer room. These two witnesses observed Robinson pulling a large tough box with wheels that appeared very heavy in weight coming out of the arms room where he worked. They then witnessed him load this tough box into his truck and drive away. The lid of this tough box was later found in a burn pit near the site of Vanessa's remains. A search of Robinson's phone shows that he called Aguilar multiple times during the night of April 22nd, which was the night of Vanessa's disappearance, and as late as 3:30 in the morning on April 23rd. He also received calls from Aguilar throughout the day. When asked why Robinson would call her after midnight if he lived with her, Aguilar actually responded that she couldn't find her phone and had him call it so that she could locate it. You know how sometimes if you can't find your phone, you'll have someone else call it so you can hear the ring and locate your phone? Well, that's what she said they were doing. However, this is of course inconsistent with the length of the calls, which were well over a minute long. When interviewed a second time, Aguilar admitted to lying to the authorities. She claimed that the reason she left home was to take a long drive to, quote, help her cope, unquote. She claims that she and Robinson went to a park in Belton, Texas to look at the stars and then went home. Cell phone data showed that on both April 23rd and April 26th, both Aaron and Cecily were in the vicinity of where Vanessa's body was later found. A burn site with disturbed earth, along with the burned remains of a tough box, probably the same tough box that witnesses saw Aaron Robinson loading into his truck that had Vanessa's remains in it, was found in an area near where Robinson's phone had pinged. And when they pulled his cell phone records, they could prove that he was nearby. And this, of course, is the location where Vanessa's body was later found. So he had some difficult questions to answer, why he was there on the night that Vanessa had disappeared, and why his cell phone was proving that he was there right on the same site where Vanessa's body was found. The soil at this site was remarkably softer than the surrounding soil, and an odor of decomposition was also noticed here. So it was obvious that it had been dug up, and because it had been kind of disturbed when they were in the process of burying her, this was pretty obvious, because when you dig something up, the soil is not nearly as hard and compact as the surrounding soil around it, and also the unmistakable odor of decomposition is very, very hard to cover up. When confronted with this information, Aguilar recanted her original story and said that Robinson had confessed to her that he killed a female soldier on April 22nd. He told her that he struck her with a hammer multiple times inside the arms room where she worked. Aguilar later said that the female, quote, never made it out of the army alive, end quote, and that Robinson placed her remains inside a box and moved her to a location near the Leon River in Belton, which is the city nearby where Fort Hood is located. Robinson then tried to set her remains on fire to dispose of her body. However, he quickly found out that the size of the flames and the smoke and the smell might actually give away his position, might draw attention to him, and people might come up and question and ask, what the hell are you doing? And so he quickly put out that fire so that he would not draw attention to what he was doing. He then took his cell phone and called Cecily Aguilar and asked her to come help him dispose of the body. Aguilar agreed. Robinson then left the site where he was out in the middle of the woods trying to burn and, bury a body, went and picked up Aguilar at a gas station where she was working late April 22nd or early April 23rd, and then took her to the site at the Leon River where he had unsuccessfully tried to burn her body. When they arrived, Robinson opened up the box and showed Aguilar Vanessa's body inside the box. Aguilar later confirmed to authorities that it was the body of Vanessa Guillén. Aguilar then told authorities that Robinson used a hatchet or a machete to cut up Vanessa's body so that it would be much easier to dispose of. After chopping her up and burying her in 3 separate holes, they left the site. They then got to thinking that they may not have disposed of her well enough and that she might be easily found. So a couple days later, on April 26th, they returned to the site where where they had disposed of her remains, and decided that they would dispose of her much more thoroughly. They dug up her remains and tried to burn her again, but fearing they would again be discovered, they put out the fire a second time. They then put her back in the 3 holes and poured concrete that Cecily had acquired earlier that day from someone on Facebook into these holes to cover up what they had done. So not only did they try and burn her body twice, they dismembered her with a hatchet or a machete and buried her body in 3 separate holes. They then dug her up at a later date, tried to set her on fire again, and then buried her remains, her dismembered remains, in the same 3 holes that they had dug up before. They then poured concrete into these holes to try and kind of cover their tracks and cover up what they had done. They then removed home and burned the clothes that they were wearing while trying to burn and dispose of her body, and went about their lives, confident they had covered up the crime. The site of Vanessa's remains were discovered about a month later by some local workers. Once Vanessa's body was identified, the Army quickly launched an investigation into what happened. Robinson was quickly identified as a main suspect based on witness testimony. Again, not only the fact that he was the last person to see her alive, but also the fact that he was loading that tough box into his truck and driving away. Robinson was subsequently held in his barracks room on base. A couple of days later, maybe a week later, he fled his barracks room. He basically escaped and left the base and became a fugitive from justice. Aguilar, under pressure from investigators, started working with CID agents. She placed a, quote, controlled, unquote, call to Robinson. I assume that meant monitored or bugged. During this call, he never denied anything that they did to Vanessa, so he kind of went along with it. Although he didn't actually admit to killing her, he didn't deny it either. Robinson then texted Aguilar photos of the breaking news stories. So by this time, stories of the murder had kind of gotten out to the local media, and the media had picked it up and were running stories about, hey, this Army private first class has been brutally murdered. She's been missing for over a month. Her remains were found in the middle of the woods. And so Robinson, kind of on the run from the law, he started texting pictures of the story and kind of following the story and texting information to Aguilar. During another controlled call, Robinson said, quote, "They are finding pieces," end quote, meaning they had discovered the remains. So he was kind of feeling the pressure, and the investigators were starting to figure out things, and they had discovered the body, and the heat was coming down. And again, Robinson was a fugitive. He was on the run at this point. So, he texted Cecily and called Cecily pretty regularly. Again, Cecily's phone calls were being monitored, and they knew that Robinson knew that he was in trouble, that things were starting to kind of crack down. And this is, kind of proof that he was involved, and he was starting to get pretty scared. Aguilar later helped investigators locate Robinson, who, after fleeing his barracks room and pretty much becoming a fugitive from justice, was on foot in Killeen and trying to evade capture. So he had kind of gone to the main city outside the base and was just, sleeping in, alleyways and things like that, and just trying to, stay one step ahead of the authorities and maintain his freedom. And, hopefully, he thought hopefully try and get away with this, or at least evade capture as long as he possibly could. So he didn't have a car. I'm not exactly sure what he did with his truck, why he didn't have that anymore. But he was walking around Killeen trying to keep a very, very low profile. Authorities later located Robinson walking on the 4700 block of East Rancier Avenue in Killeen. So they found him. However, as officers approached to apprehend him, Robinson pulled out a pistol and shot himself in the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. So he kind of took the coward's way out. During this entire time, Cecily Aguilar made some rather shocking Instagram posts. And if you're on Instagram, you can go to her account. Her account is still actually active. It's Cecily, Cecily 5818. And you can go on there and kind of look at the dates of some of these posts, and just kind of look at the nature of the pictures that she chose to post during this time between when she had helped, Robinson dispose of a very, very brutally murdered person, cut her up, set her on fire, buried her, and between the time that she was finally arrested. And it's just, again, very, very shocking what level she was on, because a lot of these are very, very almost sexual in nature, and very, very kind of almost borderline erotic. Again, if you're interested, she's still on Instagram. Her account is still active, so go over there and check it out and see exactly what I'm talking about. And a lot of her pictures are pretty much the same. So there are, a lot of very eroticized pictures, and she definitely, this is pretty much the nature of her entire account. Almost every single picture that she has is very, very flirtatious in nature. And, the post that she made during this time, when she, in the back of her mind, she knew that she had killed and dismembered and disposed of a corpse, they didn't change. They were still very, very sexualized in nature. So that kind of gives you a pretty good picture of where her head was at during this time, and how almost detached she had to become to continue to post content like that on social media. However, once all this conspiracy and everything kind of came to light, her involvement with Robinson and kind of what they had done, and she started again working with a lot of the authorities, the CID division and the local police, and she helped them track down Robinson and eventually find where he was. But once all of this kind of came out, she was charged with conspiracy to tamper with evidence, more specifically to, quote, corrupt, alter, destroy, mutilate, and conceal an object, end quote, with the intent to, quote, impair its integrity and availability for later use, end quote. Now, I'm going to kind of go over the actual details of her indictment and exactly what is involved in the statement made by one of the lead investigators, and kind of read exactly what he said the nature of this investigation entailed. I'm also going to post the podcast of the indictment and the court documents on our webpage along with this blog post and podcast. So if you're interested, head over to our webpage and take a look at that. If she is eventually convicted of this, and the trial is still ongoing, she hasn't been convicted yet, she could actually face up to 20 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000, which is quite a bit of money, but again, not nearly enough for what she actually did. Now, granted, she didn't actually kill Vanessa, but she did actually help cover it up and dispose of the corpse and try and set it on fire and things like that. So again, she is very, very responsible for what happened. Equally so with Aaron Robinson, but definitely she needs to face some consequences. There needs to be some justice done in this, and she was most definitely involved. When she went on trial, or her arraignment or whatever, and when she was asked by the judge if she actually understood the charges against her, she replied, quote, yeah, sure, end quote. Just kind of a very nonchalant, very blowing this whole thing off like it's no big deal. Aguilar actually pled not guilty to the charges. She has no bond and will remain in police custody until her trial, determining her fate. The Guillén's family attorney, Natalie Quaham, or Quam, Khawam, said that Aguilar attempted to flee the country and attempted to delete her Google account prior to arrest. So she was certainly a flight risk, apparently, which is probably why the judge gave her, no bond. Cecily Aguilar was indicted on July 14th, 2020, by the grand jury of the Western District of Texas, Waco Division, on one count for 3 separate dates. Those 3 dates are April 22nd, 2020, April 23rd, 2020, and April 26th, 2020. The charges were that she did unlawfully and knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with another person to corruptly alter, destroy, mutilate, and conceal any record, document, and other object, including the body of Vanessa, and did attempt to do so with the intent to impair its integrity and availability for use in an official proceeding. So it appears that the justice system, in this case at least, has worked out. It's done its job. Aaron Robinson is dead by a gunshot by his own hand, and Cecily Aguilar, who helped him, has been indicted by a grand jury. She hasn't gone to trial yet, but at least, there's sufficient evidence to warrant her going on trial for, mutilation of a corpse. Vanessa was posthumously promoted from private first class to specialist on July 21st, 2020, because she had met time in service and time in grade requirements to merit the promotion. So she was given a promotion posthumously after she died, which I guess that's good. It doesn't really make up for the fact that she, lost her life in a very brutal and very heinous way in a place where she should have been safe. And, even though the sexual harassment was going on, people have a right to feel safe at work, especially when you're working on an army base. However, this has been kind of a dragged out thing by the army. The army kept giving her family the runaround pretty much the entire time of this investigation. It seems like the army was definitely trying to save its own ass and cover up what happened, under its own nose on its watch. And they are continuously kind of blocking requests by the Guillén family attorney to, subpoena documents and there had to have been some kind of video cameras or some kind of documentation or whatever that would have shown exactly what happened. I can't imagine that something as high security as a U.S. Army base, in the armory room, especially where all the munitions and all the guns and everything are kept, would not have some kind of video documentation or some kind of security protocol or measures that would keep that area quite secure. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that the Army would not be able to, tell what happened, or what went on during that time when Vanessa was inside the room with Specialist Robinson. And I find it very, very difficult to believe that no one knows what happened. That someone didn't hear something, someone didn't see anything. If you bludgeon someone with a hammer multiple times in the head, there's going to be a big mess to clean up. And, that stuff had to have gotten on the walls, and just, massive amounts of blood just everywhere inside that room. Who cleaned that up? Did Specialist Robinson, when he went back to, complete the training, was that when he cleaned it up? Did he clean it up between the time when, after he killed her, before he, wheeled that tough box into the bed of his truck and drove off for the day? That had to have taken hours and hours to clean that room up. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that would have gone unnoticed, that no one else would have walked in the room. No one else would have, seen or heard anything, her screams, or he missed a speck of blood behind a counter somewhere. That just, with forensics the way that it is today, I just find that very, very, very difficult to believe that there is no evidence or anything that the Army can use and give that to her family and give them some closure and give them, some peace of mind that they are doing everything that they possibly can, and that leaving no stone unturned in their, mission or journey to get to the bottom of this and to figure out exactly how Vanessa died and when it happened and who did it. Because as of now, it's still kind of conjecture. No one, really knows for sure that Specialist Robinson is the one who killed her. But again, all the circumstantial evidence and all the fingers pretty much point to that way, especially, with the aftermath of the cell phones pinging in the area where her body was found, and the communication between Robinson and Aguilar while Robinson was on the run. A lot of that, it makes him look very, very guilty. But again, I just find it very, very difficult to believe that there is no evidence whatsoever. There is, no video or no witness testimony that someone would be left alone in an armory room for that long to be able to clean up the gruesome crime scene that had just ensued. It really makes absolutely no sense, and that's a big hole that her family's really trying to get to the bottom of, and the Army is just really making it very, very difficult for them to get the answers that they need. And Vanessa's mother is so incensed and so put off and so rightfully pissed that she says she's gonna, quote, shut this base down, unquote, until she starts getting some answers from the Army. Because, the Army is just really kind of giving them the big middle finger and, really trying to cover up a lot of things. I think, the Army kind of has the armed forces in general, big public government institutions, it's definitely in their best interest to kind of keep this under wraps. And, same thing with big corporations and anything that could be potentially damaged by a lot of bad press. And the fact that they were so lax in their security and so lax in keeping an eye on what was going on right under their noses, it's definitely in their best interest to cover this up and keep this out of the limelight. And I'm sure they wish that the Guillén family would just kind of go away. But her mother is a spunky little woman, and she's not taking no for an answer. She is really, really doggedly pursuing the truth in this, and she's gotten a lot of media attention, and she's brought it really into the forefront of the social consciousness of these past couple of months. And again, it's gotten a lot of traffic, a lot of attention from, YouTubers and bloggers and other podcasters. And this is something that, they're painting murals in the city, and, the hashtag I am Vanessa Guillén is trending on Twitter, or it was at one time. Celebrities like Selma Hayek and it's are really getting involved in this and bringing a lot of much needed attention, and kind of putting the screws to the army to kind of bring this out and stop covering their ass, and stop burying this in an attempt to kind of make this go away, because the family's not going away. They really want, and frankly they deserve, to know what happened to Vanessa, and to kind of get that closure and get that much needed information so that they can put this behind them and move on with their lives. But as it stands now, it's really a very, very sad, very, very sickening ordeal. This whole thing that that Vanessa could be murdered directly under the noses of such a public institution that, again, is in their best interest to cover up, is really one of the things that's fueling the outrage behind this. And that's a very, very good thing, I think, that the pressure, the social pressure being placed on them to bring this to light and to kind of come out from behind their big curtain and face what happened. And not only for the whole killing of Vanessa Guillén, but also the whole culture of sexual harassment and toxic masculinity that is pretty rampant in the armed forces today. Vanessa was very uncomfortable and very, almost, it seemed, scared, because she was not able to report this, or I don't know if she was actually not able to, but she definitely chose not to because she feared the consequences. And a lot of times, these hyper masculine groups, such as the military, they're going to put a lot of pressure on women to stay quiet. And in this culture of sexuality and the whole Me Too movement and a lot of these things, again, the times, they are a changing. We have this culture in our country where women are starting to rise up and not take it anymore, which is of course a very, very good thing. No woman should have to fear the consequences of speaking out when she's being sexually abused or sexually harassed. So the Vanessa Guillén case is really one of those that is shedding a light on a whole lot of things that are wrong in our culture, and it sheds a lot of light on these things all at the same time. So hopefully this gets picked up by a whole lot more people, and the Guillén family gets the justice and the answers that they deserve, because no one should have to go through not only losing a child, but also not really fully understanding and not knowing exactly the nature of what happened to cause that. So that is the Vanessa Guillén case. Hopefully you've enjoyed hearing about this. I'm going to post again the affidavit and the complaint form against Cecily Aguilar, who of course is the only one who will face any kind of recompense or any kind of punishment for Vanessa's death. So I will post that on the blog page on our website at reddoorinvestigations.com. So make sure you stop by and read up on that. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys have enjoyed hearing about Vanessa Guillén. Hopefully it has shocked you and disturbed you enough to where you will, join in the movement. And this is becoming a movement. This is, a lot like the George Floyd case, that caused a lot of the riots and the protests that are happening now. The Vanessa Guillén case is not quite the same level, but it's sparking a lot of outrage and a lot of action and movement from a lot of people in our culture to kind of bring this to a close and help the Guillén family get some answers and get some resolve and be able to move on with their lives. So hopefully this has been informative, and I wish you guys the very best, and I hope that you make good choices and, do your thing out there. Be good to each other. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. This is the Investigation Guru podcast, and I am Sean, signing off.